This is a product tutorial for Sense, a whole-of-government business intelligence tool that allows government officers to query their databases in natural language. If you're watching this first episode in our series of product tutorials, congratulations! You've probably just gotten your hands on Sense, one of the newest LLM digital products that GovTech has created for the Singapore Public Service. Or maybe you're trying to figure out how to hit that next bound in your data strategy. So we're lucky to have you. Regardless, get ready to learn not just about how to use Sense in your daily work, but also pick up the know-how of how to interact with LLMs. Sense is a business intelligence tool that allows you to explore, visualize, and extract data from your databases using nothing but natural language. It has an underlying large language model that facilitates this interaction. Hard to believe? Let's get into it. This first tutorial is meant to give you a sense of how Sense works. Sense works by connecting to a database of your choice and scanning it for datasets. If this is your first time using Sense, we really recommend asking Sense to tell you what datasets he has connected to by using a simple query. What datasets do you have? When this query is asked, Sense generates a data catalog for you, which describes the name of your dataset, the data fields it contains, the type of variables in each data field, and accompanying metadata. Gone are the times when you had to ask around endlessly just to know what data fields you had access to. In this case, you see that we've connected to a database that has open COVID-19 case details, kindly provided by the Ministry of Health. Whether you're a seasoned data analyst or just a beginner, Sense is here to be your business intelligence assistant. If you're stuck or overwhelmed, just ask Sense to suggest some interesting patterns that could be investigated with your dataset. You'll find that Sense gives a very good first draft, and replies will only get better when your prompts become more specific. Here, you see it giving quite a number of starting inquiry lines to kickstart your data work. Now, we've built in memory for Sense, so it's able to remember the context of your chat session. Suppose you're interested in idea number 1 above. You don't have to type everything out again. Just tell Sense to refer to idea number 1 above, and it will proceed to conduct a simple investigation for you. Here's a pro tip. If you realize Sense isn't generating SQL codes for you, ask it to do so. It'll come in super handy. Alright, what's a SQL code, you ask? We'll explain shortly. When you ask a query, Sense first generates a SQL code to answer your query. You'll see an example of this in the black section in the chat box. It's essentially a piece of code that extracts data from a database to answer your query. If you don't understand code, that's fine. After the black section, Sense will explain and summarize the function of the SQL code in natural language. What we really need you to pay attention to is simply the data fields that are being referenced. In this case, we see that it's referencing the H_group field. Is that correct? Pause the video now and rewind to the data catalog to find out. You'll realize that there's no such field called H_group. As expected then, Sense fails to produce any meaningful output because the H_group field simply does not exist. Don't worry about troubleshooting this for now. We specially created this mistake in this video to illustrate the extent of comprehension that Sense has, and also to tell you why the black SQL section is so useful for debugging. Let's try asking Sense why it thinks that the query has failed, like any reasonable human being. When you do this, Sense introspects, and it realizes it has referenced a non-existent column. It then corrects itself to use an existing H column. And there you go, rewrites the SQL code even better than before, and produces a grey section known as the numerical output. This is the final answer to your query. Notice how there's also a CSV file generated. This contains all the line items in your database, extracted and aggregated to answer your query. Feel free to download it for further exploration. Right, let's stop here and summarize. You've learned a lot today. You can try asking your own queries, but here's what you need to know in order to get started with the Sense chat interface. You can ask Sense to provide a data definition table, and also ask it to suggest what data analysis can be conducted. Sense remembers the context of your conversation, so you can reference earlier portions of your chat without having to type them out all over again. You can ask Sense to examine its own work if a query doesn't seem to work at first. Or if you're feeling confident, try telling it specifically what to do. Sense also generates certain key outputs, including a SQL code section, an explanation of the SQL code, a numerical output section, and a CSV file that contains relevant data for further exploration.